If your budget for buying a property does not include the cost of due diligence, you probably should hold off from buying that property. I repeat, hold off. Every real estate consultant talks about the importance of proper due diligence when buying a property, but it's evident that majority of the buying population have little or no understanding on how to go about it. You see, I've come to realize that what most people understand as due diligence when buying a property is having a surveyor chart a land before buying, or verifying the property title at the Lands Bureau. Well, these are important things to do, but is that all there is to due diligence? Absolutely not. Due diligence is a bit more complicated than that, but stay with me, I'll break it down for you. What exactly is due diligence in real estate? Due diligence, as far as real estate is concerned, is ensuring all T's are crossed and I's are dotted when buying a property, in order to ensure that your interest is protected. However, you need to understand that the due diligence procedure for each property can be a bit unique, depending on the circumstance surrounding the property in question. You see, understanding how to go about due diligence is also a function of your understanding of basic real estate technicalities. And to get a quick understanding of these basic real estate technicalities and terms, please watch this video I made a month ago. And in addition to understanding basic real estate terms like excision, CFO, governor's consent, Gazette, freehold, and so on, it is also expedient, also important to know the necessary real estate related government bodies in Lagos State and what their responsibilities are. That way you can practically apply the procedures that we explained in this video and also be able to interpret the report of a due diligence procedure. There are several real estate related government bodies in Lagos State, which I'll talk about in detail in another video. But for the sake of understanding due diligence in Lagos real estate, we'll be focusing on just 6 of them. And number 1 on that list is Lands Bureau, Alausa. Lands Bureau is in charge of titling when it comes to property in Lagos. You want to process certificate of occupancy, governor's consent, Lands Bureau handles all that. Think of them as the landlord of government in Lagos and also the official record keepers for anyone who owns land or who wants to buy land in Lagos. Second is the Surveyor General's office. This office is like the surveyor of the state. You want to verify a survey, you want to engage a registered surveyor for getting a registered survey. All of those activities always have to go through the Surveyor General's office. They also determine which part of the state is committed and which is not. You can see them as the office that keeps the official map of the state. Third is LASPA, Lagos State Fiscal Planning and Permit Authority. This agency is responsible for issuing building permits for any construction in Lagos State. They approve your architectural, structural, mechanical, and electrical designs. They also design the city's master plan and ensure that every building follows the zonings in the master plan. Think of them as the architect of the state. The fourth is LAPSCA, Lagos State Building Control Agency. Their job is to ensure every construction aligns with the approved permits issued by LASPA, and so to make sure that every construction is constructed to safety standards. You can see them as the official police, the building inspector of the state. And fifth, we have Lagos State Material Testing Laboratory. Their responsibility is to test all construction materials like cement, sand, iron rod, concrete, blocks, soil, and even water to ensure they are safe and good enough to build with. Think of them as the quality control lab for construction and building materials in Lagos State. And finally, number 6 is New Town Development Authority, NTDA. NTDA is like the Lagos State town planner or developer of new areas. Their job is to plan, design, and develop new towns, new communities across the state, especially fast developing places like Ekpe, Ibejuleki, Badagry, and so on. Now that you have an understanding of basic real estate terms and also you understand the relevant real estate government bodies in Lagos, now let's get a bit more practical. You see, I like to see the due diligence procedure in 3 different stages. The first stage is the title search stage, legal search, and social check. At the title search stage, you get to do things like confirming the certificate of occupancy or governor's consent, verifying the building permit, LAPSCA authorization, and other regulatory compliances. Second stage, which is the legal search, where you get to do things like probate search, litigation search, and debt check, and in some cases, deed verification. So what is a probate search? Probate search is pretty much ensuring that the seller has a right to sell a property inherited from a deceased person. And then we have litigation search. Litigation search is pretty much ensuring that the property is not subject to any ongoing lawsuits or legal dispute. And then there's debt check, which can also be called encumbrance check. And that is also ensuring that the property is not subject to any unpaid loans or mortgages, or probably the property has not been used as a collateral. Now the third and the last stage, which is social check. So the approach here is a bit informal, because here you get to visit the area and ask questions about the property from within the neighborhood. What you're doing here pretty much is trying to dig deep to get information that may not be captured in the government database. You see, every practical scenario I'll talk about in this video must go through these 3-stage processes. But remember what I said earlier, that the due diligence procedure for each property might be a bit unique depending on the circumstance of the property. And what that means in this context is that not every property would go through all the steps in these 3 stages. But stay with me, you understand better as we go along. There are 4 different scenarios I'd like to use to explain how due diligence works in Lagos real estate. Scenario 1, due diligence on a house built on a titled land. Scenario 2, due diligence on a house built on an untitled land. Scenario 3, due diligence on a titled land. And scenario 4, due diligence on an untitled land. Now, scenario 1, due diligence on a house built on a titled land. Remember I said earlier that every due diligence procedure must go through these 3-stage processes: the title search, legal search, and the social check. They are like your checklist for evaluating any property. So for a house built on a titled land, we start with the title search stage. At this stage, we get to do things like, we start with verifying the title of the land itself, which means confirming the authenticity of the land title at the Lands Bureau and obtaining the CTC. The CTC copy is the certified true copy. And to get the CTC, you send the file number, the title number of either the certificate of occupancy or governor's consent to the Lands Bureau. And once the CTC is generated, it will carry all the detail, all the information about the land title. Now pay attention. When you receive the CTC, the name on the title must match with the name of the person trying to sell the property to you. And if the name differs, you have to clearly understand the legal relationship between the person trying to sell to you and the actual title holder. Next is to check the zoning on the title. If what you're trying to buy is expected to be a residential property, the CFO must reflect residential zoning. And if the case is otherwise, say the property was previously zoned for commercial or agriculture, there has to be a deed of rectification, officially converting the zoning from whatever it was to residential. And again, you need to check, reflect in the title. Then your surveyor would visit the site to pick the coordinates of the property. The goal here is to ensure that the specific portion of land you're being sold actually falls within the land covered by the CFO. The surveyor would overlay the coordinates picked on site with the survey plan used for the original title in order to ensure alignment. The next key step at this stage is to request the building permit from the seller. This is always issued by LASPA, Lagos State Fiscal Planning and Permit Authority. Now that this house is a house built on a titled land, it is expected that the property should be able to get a permanent permit. However, in reality, most developers, most sellers don't usually wait. They just proceed with construction without getting the permit. The usual excuse is bureaucratic delays and inefficiencies in processing approvals. So now the smart advice in this case would then be that to request for any evidence that the building permit process has started and all necessary payments have been made. So most developers and sellers would usually present revenue receipt or application form. But as a smart investor, you have to understand that this is not enough. To properly verify the seller's or developer's claim, you have to send a revenue receipt or application form to the Lagos State Fiscal Planning and Permit Authority for them to help you confirm whether the building permit application has actually started and if all necessary payments have been made. Now, note that in this case, the permit is not ready. The seller has just started the procedure. So you're essentially banking on the seller to follow through with getting the approval. So if you're the type of investor who's willing to proceed under such conditions, you should at least try to tie the seller's obligation to getting the approved permit to specific clauses in the contract of sale. The next step at this stage would be to request confirmation from the Lagos State Material Testing Laboratory. You see, every credible developer is expected to submit all their materials for testing before they start construction at all. Getting a confirmation from Lagos State Material Testing Lab is giving you confirmation that the house you're trying to buy was built with tested and approved materials, not cheap and substandard alternatives. Now, we proceed to the second stage of the due diligence process, which is the legal search. And the very first item we'll tackle here is the litigation search. With litigation search, we start with the High Court of Lagos State Civil Litigation Department. You can visit the litigation registry at either Ikeja or Lagos Island. Submit an application for a search with using the property address or names of party involved, especially the name of the seller or any former known owners. Some courts might require a formal letter or a token for this search, and keep in mind you might need the service of a lawyer to interpret any court records that come up. This search is important because it helps reveal pending, ongoing, and past legal disputes, including ownership claims, encumbrance, controversies, and any fraudulent sales connected to that property. Next is debt search. This can be conducted at the Lagos State Land Registry, Ikeja. And if the seller is a company, you also want to run a search using Corporate Affairs Commission tools. At the Land Registry, what you have to do is to submit a request using the title file number of the property to retrieve the file and check if there are any registered encumbrance like mortgages, liens, or caveats. And if the seller is a company, a corporate search using CAC tools will help you determine if the property has been pledged as collateral for any corporate loan. Now to the probate search. This is usually done at the probate registry of the High Court of Lagos, either in Ikeja or Lagos Island, depending on the location of the property. Here you request a search of letter of administration or grant of probate. You need to provide the name of the deceased person and, if possible, the date of death. If a grant has already been issued, you have to request a certified true copy of the probate document and verify the names of the administrators or executors. And then you have to now proceed to confirm if the name of the person selling to you is listed as an administrator or executor, or if the person has the sole rights. And if the person is trying to sell the property alone to you, you also have to request for more like a power of attorney from other named administrator to confirm that they have given the person the right to sell the property alone. The final step for a house built on entitled land, which is social check. Now, in some cases, for a house built on titled land, social check might not seem very necessary, but it is still a very powerful tool because it involves going to the area, meeting with the locals, meeting with the local heads in the community to understand and get information that might not be stated in official government records. This can help uncover unregistered disputes, multiple claims on the property, things that you can't possibly find in government records. And as far as buying a property in Lagos is concerned, it is still a very powerful tool to always consider. Scenario 2, due diligence on a house built on an untitled land. As I earlier said, the procedure also follows the 3 standard stages, which is the title search, legal search, and the social check. But considering the fact that this is a house built on an untitled land, these procedures should be implemented in a very delicate way because the property is built on an untitled land. Now, for the first stage, which is the title search, we don't have to do title verification because it is an untitled property. So the first thing to do in this case is to send a surveyor to the site to pick coordinates of the property and run a check on that coordinate at the Surveyor General's office to determine whether the property is free, committed, or encumbered in any way. And if the results come out positive, then figure out what is the route to getting a title and probably start the titling process immediately. Next thing to do at this title search stage now is then to match the coordinates picked on site with the coordinates on the survey presented to ensure proper alignment. Now the next thing is to request for a building permit. And now there is a case of a property built on an untitled land. what is visible is a temporary permit, right? And then there's always a clause on the permit that states that applicants are expected to process their title within a given time frame in order to qualify for a permanent permit. And just like in the case of a property built on a titled land, most developers don't always have the permit ready. Even the temporary permit, they don't always have it. So the best thing is now to request for evidence that the permit has started, like the application procedure has started. And most of the times they only provide just the revenue receipt or application form. And next thing to do in this case now is also to proceed to the Lagos State Physical Planning and Permit Authority, send the application form or revenue receipt to them for confirmation, to confirm that this application process for the permit has actually started and all necessary payments have been made, and also confirm further the zoning of that particular property in the database of the Physical Planning and Permit Authority, to ensure that it's a residential property, and then the permit is not headed for rejection. Because like I said earlier, this is a case of a house built on an untitled land. It has to be applied, the procedures has to be applied in a bit more delicate manner. And again, in a case like this, you have to understand that the permit is not ready yet. And if you're the type of investor who is willing to proceed under such conditions, just as I mentioned earlier, it is also advisable to tie the seller's obligation to getting the approved permit to enforceable clauses in the contract of sale. And then as part of the compliance regulation, other compliance regulations, you also have to request lab scar confirmation and also confirmation for the material testing, Lagos State Material Testing Laboratory. This is also to confirm that the property you're buying is built to regulatory standard. Now to stage 2, legal search. This also begins with litigation search. Same procedure as that of a house built on a titled land. Visit the High Court litigation registry and file a search request using the name or address of the property, and then screen for dispute or any claims tied to the property. Now you proceed to the debt search. Now in this case now, it's a bit different because now the property is untitled and there shouldn't be any mortgage existing, because no bank would issue a loan against an untitled property. So in this case, if you're buying from an individual, what you should do instead is to run a personal credit check through platforms like the credit registry. And if you're buying from a company, you can also carry out the CAC charge search to determine whether the property has been listed as an asset or is subject to any encumbrance or lien. And then the probate search. The procedure remains the same as in scenario 1. Visit the probate registry, search for letters of administration or grant of probate, and verify the executorship and ensure there is no unresolved dispute among the listed administrators. Now to the final step of this stage, because it's a case of an untitled land, a house built on an untitled land. So it's also important to do what I like to call deed verification, which simply means verifying the authenticity of the deed. And let me give a practical scenario to explain this better. A couple years ago, one of my clients wanted to buy a house somewhere on the island. It was a house built on an untitled land. We've started the land, everything came out good, everything was positive. But looking at the deed, it seems a bit odd to me because it was just the name and address of the lawyer that was there. Phone number was not there, and the email was not there. So, and I noticed the seal, there was something off about the seal. So I made an extra move. I went to the lawyer's office and the lawyer denied. To my surprise, the lawyer denied preparing that document. And when that happened, we eventually realized it was the agent who brokered the deal that prepared the deed by himself. And that's because the buyer is a cousin of his, and also the lawyer is an acquaintance of his who has been preparing documents for him in the past. So he leveraged on that relationship to forge the document instead of paying the legal fee of something as low as 300 or 400,000 naira. That is why deed verification is very important, especially in the case of an untitled land, because it is not titled. This is having the right document is a very important lifeline for properties on an untitled land. Now to the final stage of this scenario, which is social check. Because the house is built on an untitled land, I like to advise people strongly never to skip the social check stage, because boots on ground investigation would always uncover hidden truths and information that can be found in government database. Believe me, the locals would always whisper them to you. And because it's a house built on an untitled land, This particular stage is very, very important. Now to scenario 3, which is due diligence on a titled land. As always, we follow the same 3-stage checklist, which is the title search, legal search, and social check. Now to the title search stage. What we do at first is the same as a house built on a titled land. We verify the title, and we do that by sending the file number of the property to the Lands Bureau and obtain the CTC copy. And on the CTC copy, we can see every information about the property. So what we do next is to look at the names, confirm that the name of the person trying to sell the property to us match the name on the title, which is the name of the actual title holder. And if the name differs, we also confirm the legal relationship between the seller and the actual title holder. It can be a case of a legal power of attorney, joint venture, or any other legal document confirming a relationship between them. Next thing to do is to confirm the zoning. If our purpose for buying the land is for residential purpose, we have to confirm that that title is zoned for residential. And if the case is otherwise, we have to be careful, because that could affect us getting building approvals or other compliances in the nearest future about that property. So the next thing to do at this title search stage will then be to send a surveyor to site to pick a coordinate of the property on site, and also confirm that coordinate, ensure that it aligns with the coordinates of the survey used to register the CFO. And the reason for doing this is to confirm that the land being sold to us is exactly inside the CFO portion, not outside of it, because there are cases where people fly coordinates, and if all of these things are not done, you might not know. You might be buying a property and the CFO is stating that you're buying from within the CFO, but in the real sense, what you're being allocated on site is meters away from what the CFO actually covers. Now we'll move on to the second stage, which is the legal search stage. And this process here mirrors that of scenario 1. We're doing the same thing, which is pretty much we do the litigation search to confirm there is no legal dispute on the property. We also do the probate search to ensure that the person trying to sell has the legal right to sell. And we also do the debt check as well to also confirm that the property is not subject to any form of encumbrance or loans. And lastly, we enter the stage 3, which is social check. For a titled property, social check is often optional, but highly advisable, because a discreet visit to the neighborhood to ask questions from the locals can uncover a lot of hidden truths that might not be captured in the official government records. And now on to scenario 4, due diligence on an untitled land. Just like other scenarios, we have to break this down with the 3-stage processes as well, which is the title search, legal search, and the social check. So for the title search stage, for this stage, it's an untitled land. There is no title to verify. So what we have to do first is to send a surveyor to the site to pick coordinates of the land. Run a check on the coordinates at the Surveyor General's office to confirm if the land is actually free, committed, or determine whether there are any encumbrance on the property. And if the land is free, we also have to do a further check to see if the land has been integrated into any government scheme. And it's always advisable to also start the CFO processing immediately. Another thing to do is now to confirm the coordinate picked on site with the coordinate on the survey and ensure proper alignment. Now we move to the second stage of this scenario, which is the legal search stage. Now we also have to do litigation search, probate check, and also debt check for an untitled land. So in the case of an untitled land, litigation check, it should also be done at the High Court litigation registry, where we can do the search using the name, using the address of the property, or the name of the seller, or any other past known owners, to determine whether there is any legal dispute on the property. So now to the debt check. Debt check is where it gets a bit tricky for an untitled land, because it's untitled and it's highly unlikely to be collateralized in a formal banking system. So in this case, if you're buying from an individual, what you need to do is to run a personal credit check through platforms like the credit registry. And if you're buying from a company, a CAC charge search can also help determine if the property has been listed for a corporate loan or lien or any form of encumbrance. And now we'll move to the probate search. Probate search is also very important, especially if the property is inherited. So in this case, you also go to the probate registry search for letters of administration or grant of probate, and you have to ensure that the person trying to sell the property to you is also a listed administrator. And also, if it's a case where it's a family trying to sell the land together, you also have to confirm the evidence of consent from other rightful owners of the property. And now we move to the deed verification. Now that it's a case of an untitled land where there is no title, in that case, the deed of assignment carries a lot of weight. So you have to understand you're holding an original document, and you have to do that by reaching out to the lawyer who prepared the document, ensure their stamps are actually real and that you're holding a real document and not a fake one. Now to the last stage of this scenario, which is the social check. You see, this stage for an untitled land is even more critical because for an untitled land, local intelligence is often your strongest defense. You have to engage community heads, neighboring landowners, CDA members to understand things going around the property, if there's any unresolved disputes, if there's any money drama, or sometimes secret restrictions that you might not be aware, but the locals would definitely have this information. So relating to the locals and digging deep to get information that is definitely not in the government database is always like a very important thing to do when you're dealing with untitled properties. And in a lot of cases, this has saved people millions. To further explain this, let me try to give a practical example. A couple years ago, when we were trying to embark on one of our site and service projects in the Ekpe axis, on the very day we were going to make payment for the property, I remember that the police officer overheard my conversation and just on the roadside, and he called me by the side, said he wanted to tell me something. I was there, he made me understand the Bale we've been dealing with and other family members are actually the wrong people. And he gave me the number of the real Olori Ebi, the Bale and other principal members on the spot. I called them on the spot and they asked me to come around. So when I got to their family house, those men were so honest to the point that they told me before I believe anything they're saying, I should go to the chieftaincy office in the Ekpe local government to confirm the official Bale of that area. And that was the next thing I did. I went to the chieftaincy office, met with this man. I think it was Oloye, that's his name, the person in charge of that office then. So he told me the story from when they appointed the first Bale to when they dethroned him, to when they appointed a new Bale, and now he's been using his certificates even after he was dethroned to scam people on lands in that location. So that's why I said earlier that due diligence for every type of property can be a bit unique depending on the circumstance. In this case now, we did our social check, quite all right, but we never thought we could do it this way. And from that moment was when we discovered, every land we're buying in Ekpe, we always have to go to the chieftaincy office, know what the Bale is, and ensure the Bale is the one directing us to who the real principal members are, who the real Olori Ebi is. So, and at every point of the property purchase, we ensure that the Bale signs as witness for us. And in that case, we are not getting into wrong hands. That is why for an untitled land, social check is very important, especially if you're trying to buy properties in acres. Even if it's plots too, it's not something you want to overlook in any way. Now, I know all of this might seem a bit too overwhelming, but I understand. And also that's why professionals exist. You can't do it alone. Don't think because you've consumed such valuable information, now you've become a due diligence expert overnight. Consult professionals, lawyers, real estate experts, people who understand how to navigate the Lagos State real estate terrain. And to my fellow professionals, I really hope that I've not revealed too much information. You see, this video to me isn't just information. It's a shield, and the goal is simple: for people of the kingdom to invest smartly and successfully in real estate. I hope you got some value. I'm the KBAC and this is my kingdom.